I accepted Donald Trump's invitation to run and serve as Vice President of the United States of America.
The GOP ticket is set. Donald Trump picks conservative Mike Pence. How will it play in Cleveland and in November?
We're going to have an incredible convention.
Huge countdown to Cleveland. The political circus, the security, the uncertainty. Some of the Florida delegates are here before they're there.
The county's listening. We need more money. We need more people.
The blame game begins in Broward as the hunt for a murder suspect continues. How did that guy escape from a Broward County courtroom?
Good morning and welcome. And as we come on the air this morning, we do have some news to report to you right now in Baton Rouge. We are hearing that at least 2, maybe 3 officers have been shot, and this is near the police headquarters there. Also this morning, within the last few minutes, the Sun Sentinel is reporting 2 arrests and the escape from the Broward County Courthouse. Will be following both those stories throughout the hour and later on Local 10 News. But first, the convention. Florida delegates are already gathering in Cleveland, and in just a few hours we'll be there too, as the Republican Party formally nominates Donald Trump as its presidential candidate. 6 months ago, who would have bet that Donald Trump would have been the nominee of this party, would still be in the running, much less winning the GOP standard bearer title? He grabbed the spotlight, he's held onto it, and it's all part of an election cycle like no other. It's going to get even more intense in the coming weeks and months. We begin right there, including our guests that include delegates headed to the convention. George Lemieux is a former U.S. Senator from Florida. He served there from 2009 to 2011 and is now chair at the Gunster law firm. He is a Florida delegate to the Republican National Convention. Ed Pizzoli is also a convention delegate. He is a Republican Party activist, president of the Tripp Scott law firm in Fort Lauderdale. And welcome David Dorskar, the treasurer of the Black Broward Republican Club. He's a pastor with a background in business development and education. Welcome. Good morning.
Great to have you all come in. George Lemieux, if I can, let me ask you first. The whole point of a party convention is unity, but I think the Republican Party going into the one that starts tomorrow in Cleveland is about as divided as I've ever seen. Can Donald Trump bring this party together?
I think he can, and I think he's done some things in recent weeks that have shown that he can run a really good campaign and bring in all sides of the Republican Party. Really in the last 3 or 4 weeks since he changed his campaign manager, he's run between the rails. He's been able to improve his standing in the polls, and now with Mike Pence as the VP pick, someone from the Midwest, someone who has served in Congress, someone who is a governor of an important state. He's shown that he's made a presidential level decision, really the only one you get to make before you're president, and it was a good one. So I think it's a good signal. It's going to bring in a lot of folks in Cleveland. I think he's on the right track.
Reverend Dorskar, weigh in on Mike Pence as the VP pick.
I think that he's an extraordinary pick. I'm excited. I think that he's increased spending in terms of school choice in Indiana. I think he's a wonderful pick. He's a social conservative. I'm excited.
And Ed Pizzoli, let's get you to weigh in. Mike Pence, what do you think?
We had Mike Pence in the office a couple months ago, and I got a chance to speak with him, and he was extraordinary. He is down the line, a conservative, fiscal conservative, social conservative. He is going to bring unity. He spent some time in Congress and leadership. Now he runs a very successful state government in Indiana. Yeah. It's a great pick.
Okay, so can I just say we have a table full of Republican Party people here today who you're going to tout the party line, and that's okay. But I'm interested in hearing about watching this VP pick. It is the yang to the Trump yin. Senator Lemieux, what is that dynamic there, and how will that play in Peoria and elsewhere?
Well, look, Donald Trump's an extraordinarily different kind of candidate. We've seen that. That is why he's appealing to so many Americans. That's why more Republicans showed up in these primaries than ever have in the past, and far more than the Democrats did, because he is appealing. But I think that Trump signaled to Republicans and signaled to the country that he would bring in someone who would shore up his weaknesses. What you want in a ticket is balance. So Donald is still going to be the person who's, out there hitting for the bleachers, saying the big important things and being unconventional. And Pence is going to be kind of down the road in the middle of the conservative orthodoxy. He knows how to govern. I think there's going to be a nice balance between the two.
It's pretty obvious that Senator McConnell and House Speaker Ryan are both very happy because now, if Trump is elected, they've got a pipeline directly to the White House. So it's good for them. But I mean, look, Mike Pence is going to help with conservatives, but with social moderates to liberals, he is pro-life. He's against same-sex marriage. There are all kinds of social issues where, I mean, Reverend Dorskar is right. He is very conservative on those issues, but it's not going to help Trump with any Democrat who has a problem with Hillary Clinton.
I think that moderates who maybe don't like those social issues will like Donald Trump for not being as strident on those issues, but what it says to the conservative base is, look, I made a pick of someone who believes in the same things that you believe, and I really think it's a Midwest Rust Belt strategy pick as well. If you look at the 2012 election, states like Iowa, you flip 35,000 votes, Mitt Romney wins Iowa. Ohio, you flip 50,000 votes. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. So I think this is a real play to change the map, and I think in that way it's also very smart.
You know, Florida is playing such a huge role in this vote. We looked at the map, the convention map. Florida is right there, front and center, behind New York. But okay, so number 2. But it's a great placement. But so okay, so Ed Pizzoli, you were a Bush supporter, a Jeb Bush supporter. Senator, you were too, right?
I was, yes.
So you're going to be, by Florida rules, by party rules, casting your vote for Donald Trump when you get to the convention. Take us through the personal transformation that you have gone through. What will you be thinking when you say, raise your hand and say, yes?
A real makeover, right? It was a real makeover. No, it wasn't that far, but look, you can't deny what occurred during the primary. Several 100,000 additional Republicans just in the state of Florida alone registered to participate in our primary to vote for Donald Trump. That's a big deal in this kind of most purple state. Places like Pennsylvania that we haven't seen Republicans have an opportunity. This is somebody who can bring some of those states into play. I think we've got to look bigger picture on this. Yes, I was disappointed that Jeb Bush, who was my candidate, didn't win, but it wasn't meant to be this time, and Donald Trump is speaking to people who were not part of the political process. And while we've been involved,
he brought in a lot. I mean, nearly 14 million people voted for him in the primaries, including a lot of people who haven't voted ever or haven't voted in a long time.
And democracy shouldn't be denied, though, Michael.
All right. I agree with you. If we can, let's put up on the screen so people at home can see it. Here's what Jeb Bush had to say in an op-ed in the Washington Post yesterday. Jeb Bush, supported by both George Lemieux and Ed Pizzoli. Jeb Bush wrote, "I do not believe Donald Trump reflects the principles or inclusive legacy of the Republican Party, and I sincerely hope he doesn't represent the future." Whoa, George Lemieux, that's tough stuff.
It is tough stuff, and look, it was a very divisive primary. There were a lot of things said about the candidates by the candidates that were hurtful.
Low energy Jeb.
Right.
Yeah.
So look, I've run races and I've been successful sometimes, and I've lost them others, and they're hard. They're hard to lose. But give Donald Trump, I think, the chance to really show the American people who he is. He did that by picking Mike Pence, a real solid pick. I'm sure Jeb Bush would say Mike Pence was a solid pick. Let's see what happens during these 4 days at the convention. I think we're going to come out of this convention and Donald Trump's going to be up 5 points or more in the race.
Well, but there's usually a bounce coming out.
But there were 2 things he also said in that editorial. He talked about conservative principles, about reducing taxes, reducing regulation, and putting additional school choice options front and center of the Republican Party. This is what I think somebody like Mike Pence has done, and so the addition of Mike Pence on the ticket should signal to somebody like Jeb Bush that these are the principles which they wish to govern by. I think that's why that's a great pick.
Jeb Bush, one of the people who will not be appearing, one of the prominent Republicans, will not be appearing at the convention. There are a list of those. I'm sure people watching the news know that his father won't be there, and Marco Rubio won't be there, but
John McCain
won't be there, but Ted Cruz will be.
Right.
And that's so interesting because Ted Cruz was, at the end of the primary season, boy, the fur flew between Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. Reverend, what do you think about the people who are standing up now and will be at that convention and talking about unity and backing Donald Trump, people like Ted Cruz who have done an about-face?
I think that it signals, especially with the pick of Mike Pence, that the party wants to get together, and they want to unify. I don't think that means that we have a monolithic viewpoint in terms of ideals. I don't think that the Democrats do as well. If you look at Bernie Sanders, if you look at some of his views, they're definitely different from Hillary Clinton's. But I do think that what it does demonstrate is that the party is trying to get together to unify it, to give us a chance.
Yeah, Pastor Doroscar, you are a member of the Black Republican Club of Broward County, proud to be, I know. I somehow get the feeling, don't make light of it, that they could meet in a phone booth or something. We used to have phone booths, we don't anymore. But I mean, seriously, Black Republicans are a minority, and then those supporting Donald Trump must be even more of a minority. I mean, do you feel a little lonely out there politically?
Definitely. I don't think that I think there's a lack of opportunity. Or there is a great opportunity, I would rather say, for the Republican Party to reach out to the Black community. And I think that we're in the process, in terms of our club, of reaching out to the Black community and letting them know how conservative principles can benefit them even greater than the Democratic orthodoxy. And I think that that's what we'd like to do, and also voice Black concerns in the midst of the Republican Party, to let them know what issues that we may think that they need to capitalize on as well.
Let's pick up there. When we come right back, we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be back in 2.
We are following breaking news right now out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. ABC News is reporting that 4 officers there have been shot in Baton Rouge. 2 are dead. The shooting happened less than 1 mile from police headquarters, and it follows the fatal shooting in Baton Rouge of Alton Sterling. Stay with local news for updates on this developing and tragic situation.
And we're also, just as a reminder, following news that there have been 2 arrests in the escape from the Broward County Jail on Friday. Another breaking news alert that we are following for you, and we will have whatever information we can throughout this hour.
You know, George Lemieux, before we came on the air live this morning, you commented, and I agree, that this nation has been battered by bad news for the last 6 weeks or so, starting with the Pulse nightclub shootings in Orlando. Is Donald Trump the candidate who can say things to bring us back together again, to kind of soothe our psyche, because it's been wounded?
This is a big advantage for the Trump campaign, and not to say that there should be any advantages from tragedy, but law and order and safety and security have now become the #1 issue in this campaign. And Hillary Clinton is definitely a part of this administration and where we are today. And she's going to be held accountable by the voters, in my view, for where we are, from what's happening in Baton Rouge, what happened in Dallas, what happened in San Bernardino, Orlando, Boston. This country is not safe. And I think you're going to see Donald Trump speak to these law and order issues.
Well,
and if we continue to have problems,
is she responsible more than President Obama? How is Hillary Clinton responsible? I mean, she was Secretary of State, and she certainly is accountable for things that happened in Benghazi or other things overseas. But you think that voters are going to say the country is falling apart and she's part of the reason? She's part of the status quo, yeah. She was part of this administration for 4 years. She set the tone and the policy. This administration has lacked leadership in the world. They have been temperate. They have been holding back from being aggressive to fight terrorism, in my view, in Iraq, in Syria. Under the previous administration, under George W. Bush, after 9/11, we did not have a domestic attack in this country. We took the fight to the terrorists. I think that's what you'll see in a Donald Trump administration, and I think that Hillary Clinton will be blamed in part for the problems that have resulted because of Barack Obama's failed leadership.
The question is, how can Hillary Clinton call for law and order when, she's had a blatant disregard for law? I mean, we saw that in the last couple of weeks when she, basically was lambasted by the FBI director Comey, saying that she did this and this and this and lied, and just fell short of being indicted.
He said, Ed, that she had not broken the law, but she had been, quote, extremely careless in handling classified secret information on her email server.
And it's a bit of disregard for the law. So it's difficult for somebody like that. It rings hollow when someone yells, we're a country of law, when people see your husband, the ex-president, meet with Loretta Lynch on the tarmac, and then all of a sudden she's not indicted. All those things. Now I don't know what happened there, but all of those things have a cumulative effect.
And the poll numbers reflected that, at least for a while. Although the poll numbers, at least in Florida right now, seem to be shifting back, and she is back in the lead over Donald Trump. But real quickly, let's get back to this security, because that administration is going to be largely in charge of the security in Cleveland. It is a national special security event, unprecedented security, and there have been already 122 permits pulled for protests, and then I think what they're worried about is so many more protests that people have not pulled the permits for.
I think it's wonderful that people are protesting.
Are you concerned?
No, I'm not concerned about protests. Protests are part of being an American, and your right to stand up with whatever sign and whatever sign yours says, to shout at the top of your lungs. But where the protests turn violent, or when you have a freak accident, or when you have terror, whether it's international or domestic occur, that's totally different. And in my mind, this administration has not done its job to keep Americans safe and a sense of security.
Question was, are you concerned for your safety in Cleveland?
I'm going to be alert.
Are you?
I'm going to be alert.
Good.
It's silly not to be alert. I'm going to be alert.
Well, Glenna and I are going to be there, and we're going to be alert too. Reverend Dorsgard, let me ask you, yesterday when he announced Mike Pence as his running mate, and I think in the previous few days, Donald Trump has made a point of saying, I am the law and order candidate, the law and order candidate. Now, to a number of African Americans, they see that as code, and they're saying this is not a guy who is concerned that Alton Sterling was shot in Baton Rouge or the other shootings. What do you think?
I think that the party definitely has an opportunity. I think that some conservative principles, for example, our criticism of unions, teachers' unions. The biggest criticism of the teachers' unions, for example, is that they protect the worst performing teachers at the expense of the overwhelming majority of teachers that do well. And I think that a lot of African Americans feel that something similar is happening with the police unions in terms of how they may protect some of the worst performing police officers at the expense of the overwhelming great performing police officers that do a great job.
Yeah, you know, I would like to point out that a friend of mine, a friend of the community, Marvin Dunn, this afternoon with Commissioner Xavier Suarez and I think Audrey Edmondson, is having at the Hampton House in Miami at 2 o'clock a huge celebration for cops who do a great job. They're going to hand them roses and flowers, and so more power to Marvin and to the commissioners. I think that this is something that is badly needed.
I was watching a video on my way over here that my wife was showing me of an officer, I think Tommy Norman, of the amazing community policing that he's done in inner city neighborhoods, getting in there, building trust. And I think that that type of opportunity needs to be, I guess, highlighted by the media in terms of the great work that a lot of officers are doing.
We actually have done that last week. I have to ask you, back at the convention, all of those issues that you mentioned that all have, I mean, real issues for the African American and people of color to latch onto, but you're going to watch a convention this week from Monday to Thursday where almost every speaker is white. This is, some reporter called it the lily white convention of the century. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to go there. But when you watch this convention and you see a stunning lack of diversity in that convention hall, what do you say to your constituents?
Well, I think that if you look at the Republican Party as a whole, I think that it's been pretty diverse. If you look at the Senate, for example, there's only 2 black Republican senators, one from the Democratic Party, one from the Republican Party. Tim Scott as a Republican, and you're looking at Cory Booker, who's there. If you look at the governor's races, you look at Nikki Haley, you look at throughout the country, there's a great representation of diversity in leadership within the Republican Party. So I do think that
two senators you think is great diversity?
Well, no, I'm saying that there's only 2 senators, and one is for the Democrat and one is for Republican. So to say that the Republicans are not diverse and not say the same thing for the Democrats is kind of an unbalanced scale there.
All right. George Lemieux, let me just sort of get you on the record. You supported Jeb Bush, and I think you are, and I say this admiringly, a mainstream Republican figure. Are you going to hold your nose and vote for Donald Trump, or are you going to do this enthusiastically on Thursday.
No, I'm going to vote for him. I'm not going to hold my nose. I'm very concerned about the safety of this country. I think that this president has let us down. I think Hillary Clinton will let us down if she is the commander-in-chief. I mean, right now,
and
I'm
Donald
worried
Trump will not let us down?
It'll be better. I'm absolutely convinced that he will be better on safety and security issues. Right now, I'm worried for my children, whether they're at school or at Dairy Queen or at the mall, that they're not going to be safe. And I think we are not doing the things in this country to ferret out terrorism. There are people going to these websites who are being radicalized. That's what happened probably in Nice. That's probably what happened in Orlando. We need to be doing much more than we're doing today to stop the terror that's happening inside our country.
Right, that's going to be the final word. I want to thank you all for coming in. Reverend Doris Scar, great to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll
Come
see you in
back again.
Yeah.
All right, up next, we're going to take all of this and much more to the roundtable. Stay with us. We will be back. All right, you waited for it, and now you've got it. Time for our Powerhouse Roundtable, where some of the best and brightest take a closer look at the week's top stories, offering informed opinion and experienced political judgment.
Plus. So let's get right to the introductions. Mark Caputo is the Florida correspondent for Politico, the site for all things political, and he also writes the daily Politico Florida Playbook. Katie Sorensen is a former Miami-Dade County Commissioner and just ended a successful run as the founder and director of the Good Government Initiative, which we are all sorry to see go. Marlon Hill is an attorney with the Hamilton, Miller, and Berthasell law firm. He also hosts a radio talk program on community issues. Welcome back, everyone, to the Roundtable.
Good morning. Great to have you. Great. We haven't seen you in too long, Katie. Mark Caputo, we just heard three distinguished Republicans say it's all going to be sweetness, milk, honey, and everything else in Cleveland. What do you expect?
There's this odd group of people in the Republican Party who are going to convention who somehow think that they can still deny Donald Trump the nomination.
How?
They're crazy. I don't know. They're going to cast spells. I'm not quite sure. But that's going to create a certain amount of kabuki and weirdness, and there's going to be protests outside. By and large, the Republican Party has contented itself or accepted the fact that Donald Trump's going to be its nominee. Mike Pence is a good choice for them because he shores up his conservative base. The problem, as Marlon had pointed out backstage we were talking about, is it doesn't really seem to grow the tent. And that's really where the big debate is going to become going forward after the convention.
It's funny that this convention is happening in Ohio, which is a very important state to the Republican Party. Home of the Cleveland Cavaliers, champions, by a matter of fact.
They play at the Q.
Absolutely. But, you know, like Mark was saying, you know, Pence, I think, doesn't really do anything for Trump. You know, the Trump brand is something that Donald Trump is very egomaniacally concerned about. And I don't think he adds much to it other than moving him further to the right.
Well, I think where he takes away is from women. I mean, independent women are not going to go for Pence. He has the most draconian record on women's rights issues. He was the first congressman to sponsor a bill to defund Planned Parenthood, and he wanted an abortion bill that even prevented abortions for fetal abnormalities. I mean, women are not going to go for this stuff. It's way beyond the pale.
So what happens then in November? I mean, what Trump needed, he got the anti-Trump to balance for the party, but then the party moves to November, so what happens then?
Well, I think, you know, and he didn't want to be upstaged, and Pence will not upstage him.
Clearly.
Chris Christie and Newt Gingrich, not so much.
And these are two brands. These are two brands, Trump and Clinton, that can't be upstaged. People have a pretty clear sense as to understanding as to these two brands.
Right. I think Chris Christie's spirit has been broken. You know, someone just reminded me the other day that at a campaign rally, Donald Trump had made fun of Chris Christie's weight and said, "No Oreos for you, Chris." I mean, it's the humiliation he's reaped on Chris Christie has been pretty fascinating.
Very mean-spirited. You know, I think it's fair to point out that in the Wall Street Journal NBC poll that came out this week, once again, we see that neither Hillary Clinton nor Donald Trump is liked by that many people. 61% of voters nationally see Trump unfavorably. 58% see Hillary unfavorably. I can't recall any conventions beginning where the candidates were so disliked and not respected.
It's going to be very interesting as to how undecideds or the disgruntled or the disenchanted voters, those are the voters to focus on, because everyone else is pretty fixated on Donald and Hillary. So take a very close look as to the third-party candidate, Gary Johnson. Those numbers, if they continue to creep up, he may end up in a debate.
Yeah, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, Jill Stein of the Green Party, they're getting what, about 10% in the polls, and 10% is significant maybe in this election.
For me, what it tells me is we might be heading to a very low turnout election. If that happens, generally speaking, low turnout elections benefit Republicans, not Democrats. Now, one of the interesting data points I'd seen from a group called the Morning Consult that does email-based surveying, it surveyed 40,000 Americans. The bottom line they came up with there is that people perceive this race as the election as the racist versus the liar. Those are the two choices the major parties have put forward in the perceptions of Americans.
Framing it, that's a very tough way to frame it, putting it that way, although in fact Donald Trump repeatedly, even yesterday when he announced Mike Pence, blasted Hillary Clinton as a liar, crooked Hillary. When you hear that kind of language, Katie, what do you think? I think you've practiced civility in your political
Talk
career.
about the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, really, this guy has lied about so many things, and he just makes it up as he goes along. I mean, I'm not happy about Hillary's email stuff, but I'm more concerned about issues. I'm concerned about the direction that these two are planning to take the country. And when I look at where Hillary is planning to take it, that's where I want to be. I want concern about children and families and minimum wage and women's rights and climate. Supreme Court is at the top of my list, and climate change. And how are those issues going to be addressed? Because if you go down the line with Donald Trump, we're going to go back to the 1950s. That's not where I want to be.
You know, while we're on the Supreme Court, really quickly, weigh in, Marlon, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and her really intense and out there criticism of Donald Trump. Was that, she did walk it back after an outcry, notorious RBG. Was that appropriate?
Regrettable. She shouldn't have stepped into that fray. You know, Supreme Court justices really wield a lot of power, and they really should show a lot more restraint than that.
Mark, let me ask you, let's look at Florida, our home state, our home area. The one county that, in fact, Donald Trump didn't win in March, as we know, is Miami-Dade County. Marco Rubio won here easily, 62, I think, % of the vote. I don't expect to see Donald Trump here much at all in South Florida. I think he needs Florida, but I think he pretty much is going to strategically cede South Florida to Hillary.
You're going to see him on July 26th because he's got a fundraiser in Miami, headlined by Governor Rick Scott. He also has a fundraiser that day, July 26th, in Tampa as well, so you'll definitely see him here. Florida is still probably must win for the Republicans. And if Donald Trump does not do the things he needs to do in Florida, the chances of him winning the White House are pretty slim. This is going to be a state where Hillary Clinton might just be able to kill Donald Trump's candidacy. There was a report, there's buzz out there from Politico, my colleagues at Politico, that this coming Friday, Hillary Clinton might announce her running mate in Florida, sending a sign that, hey, Florida's important.
And who might that be?
That's a great question. I would not hazard a guess.
Any guess?
I don't know. I'm not guessing either. It's really
I think we need to wait a week for that. But
we've been chasing
this
year.
Florida.
We're forgiving. You can take a guess, and if you're right, it's okay.
Clint Eastwood. I'm kidding. He should speak at the convention again, though. That'll be really interesting.
That was a great moment where he spoke to the empty chair. But that does bring up the subject of who's going to speak at the convention.
Trump.
And it's all the Trump family.
Remember
Tim Tebow's not.
Remember Chris Christie's speech leading up to the Romney nomination? I mean, that was really interesting. I don't think we're going to see that kind of Chris Christie speech again, where it was all about Chris Christie. Not so much anymore. But what is he going to do? The poor guy. I mean, he's really
the speaking list. Katie, I think, will speak very loudly as to who the base voters will be. Pay very close attention. These things are highly curated. When you look at the Republican convention, you look at the Democratic convention, take a look at who they're appealing to, and you'll be able to see which coalition is going to be motivated to vote.
But I have to say, not that it's flash and trash and everything, but the list of speakers at the Republican convention lacks star power. The list at the Democratic convention just came out, and there's some real high-profile people.
I guess, but Donald Trump is, I mean, we've spent more time talking about him here and everywhere than anyone else.
That's true.
I would imagine that Donald Trump's speech at the convention is going to be the most watched convention speech ever or in a long time. Certainly going to be more watched than Hillary Clinton. He's a fascinating character and speaker.
So the question becomes, will there be a teleprompter that he will stick to, or will he just go off,
make it up as he goes along?
Which is really fun to watch.
Well,
Mixture of the two.
I mean,
People
as the famous phrase says, dance with the one that brung you, and the one that sort of got Donald Trump this far is improvising. I mean, he likes to look at him yesterday.
I
with
hope we
Mike
don't see
Pence.
Donald
He
dancing,
came
though.
out to say, I'm picking Mike Pence, and spent 28 minutes talking about everything but Mike Pence.
Yeah.
I mean, talked about getting this new hotel in Washington and everything else.
But that's part of his appeal. I mean, people are responding to him, and if anyone thinks for a minute that Donald Trump is a joke, just look at the polls. If he is against a candidate, a deeply flawed candidate in Hillary Clinton, one who generally runs from the press and who is perceived widely as not being honest, and the FBI director gave a lot of credence to the belief that
Wait a
she's not an
second. He
honest
offers
person.
simple solutions. People want to hear simple solutions.
This is
from
true.
him. Build a wall and outlaw abortions, and all these
Well,
simplistic
Hillary
kinds
Clinton
of
does the same
ideas.
thing. It's like health care for everybody.
Well, frankly, we
but
do the same thing in
actually-
television. The simpler the message, that is a fact. The simpler the message, the easier it is to buy into.
Well, we are trying for a little nuance here on the roundtable, so stick with us. We'll be back with another segment in just a minute. Welcome back. We are in the midst of our roundtable with Marlon Hill, Katie Sorensen, Mark Caputo. Mark, you are our guru on state politics. This U.S. Senate race, well, maybe you're not a guru, but you certainly know what you're talking about. Be a guru.
Pundit, right?
All right, you're pundit. Patrick Murphy is the anointed Democratic Party candidate for the Senate, but he's gone through a terrible few weeks here, resume inflation, and then just this past week, he reportedly, a staff member, asked the Small Business Administration to delay by a day, announcing they would help businesses up on the Treasure Coast affected by the algae bloom. And yet, he seems to be doing okay against Marco Rubio in these polls.
Well, it's a kind of pick your poll thing. Quinnipiac had Marco Rubio beating by 13 points, which is not very okay, 50 to 37.
Yeah, that's true.
NBC Wall Street Journal Marist poll had a 47-44 race in Rubio's favor. Elections in Florida are just notoriously close. And more than likely, this is going to be like all the other elections, and it's going to be very close. Yeah. Rubio is, the polling shows, the only Republican candidate who has a real good shot of maintaining the seat for the Republicans, because it just doesn't look like a good year for the GOP.
But I think what's really stuck is the idea that Rubio was an absentee senator. That, okay, he was off campaigning for presidency, but he was not doing his job, which is voting on issues.
He was pretty disinterested there for
and
at least
said he
a
didn't
year
even
or
like
so.
being a senator.
The senator is also, Katie, going to get his folks in Miami-Dade County. Remember, that's the only county that he won,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But Congressman Murphy has a lot of work to do in building up the coalition of Democrats. He hasn't sealed that up yet, quite frankly.
No.
So August 30th, he has a lot more work to do with regards to getting those poll numbers up. So we'll see whether the 48-hour news cycle and the troubles that he's had recently will die down.
Carlos Baruf is spending a lot of money on the air around the state, but does he even have a chance in coming close to Rubio?
I would say no. I don't want to forecast or forecast an election like that, but Carlos Baruf is an unknown Republican, a political newcomer. How he's going to be able to beat Marco Rubio, there's no poll out there that suggests he's remotely close, but stranger things have happened.
Despite a $15 million spend.
All right, we want to move on here to, I think, a really unusual, almost unprecedented event that happened at the Broward County Courthouse on Friday. A suspected murder, a murder suspect, he was going to be hearing about the murder charge, named Deontay Rosales, was in shackles and handcuffs, was taken into the courtroom, suddenly shed the shackles and the handcuffs, ran out, and he is still at large. And here is what Sheriff, I almost said Lamberti, Scott Israel, here's what Sheriff Israel had to say soon after the escape.
The county's listening. We need more money.
Why would he talk about money when this is about saving lives and getting this suspect back under their supervision? The buck stops at the top. He's the leading law enforcement professional in Broward County.
Well, that was really too little from Sheriff Israel. What he was saying was that the Broward County Commission had not funded the Broward Sheriff's Office sufficiently, and they were understaffed at the courthouse. Maybe not the first thing to say when you show up after somebody's escaped.
Right, that could be the case, but unless this guy was Houdini, there must have been some kind of collaboration, that his shackles weren't really shackling him, and that he had an outfit ready to wear underneath his costume. So there was something else going on, and that has to be investigated.
Apparently he's definitely Houdini, because he had to have had help being shackled at your wrists, your waist, and your ankles, and then to escape the building. But this is also an election year for the Broward Sheriff. It's not a good time.
Yeah, you know, give me a break, Sheriff. Are you really going to blame the county commission because you didn't have enough people there? You're the sheriff. You have enough officers. I must admit, I don't know their exact staffing numbers. I do know that there are a lot of officers from BSO who have been known to ticket people for being on bicycles and do low-level marijuana arrests. You had the opportunity to prioritize how to run your office. And the reality is, this happened on his watch. Something went wrong with the protocols or the staffing, and that's his fault, not the Broward County Commission.
For anyone who is just joining us, we are reporting that there have been 2 arrests somehow related to this escape. For anyone who hasn't been in the Broward County Courthouse, it's the 4th floor of this courtroom. You have to not only come downstairs, but through certain wings of old and new courthouses.
It's a maze.
To get out. It's almost, there are just too many questions right now.
Yeah. All right, before we run out of time, I do feel obliged to raise the subject of this horrendous attack in Nice, France this week, where at least 84 people died. About 200 people were grievously wounded, injured by the truck driver, this Tunisian who was driving down the Promenade des Anglais. I've walked down that street. It's just one of the great streets of the world. It's a beautiful city. Marlon, what can we say? How does this apply to how we conduct our own security in this country?
Well, and everyone, of course, needs to remain vigilant. We need to, if you see something, say something, as the law enforcement officers encourage us to do. But certainly we're moving into a very anxious time where this issue of trying to address radical jihadists or terrorists or whatever, with regards to identifying who are we at war with right now? How are we going to identify where these folks are?
We don't even know that this guy was a terrorist. He may have just been an angry guy who was beating up his wife and had all kinds of alcohol problems and decided one day to get a hold of a truck and mow people down. We don't even know if it was terrorism. And by the way, there is so much domestic terrorism that it's hard to distinguish one from the other. And
what a month it has been. It just seems like the world is just coming apart. And we spoke a little bit about it in the last segment. Does this sense of fear, pervasive fear, does that help the Donald Trump ticket?
We keep hearing that it will and that it does. I haven't seen any evidence of it. I have a very fatalistic view. We're going to have more mass shootings. We're going to have more terrorist attacks. And I'm just not sure what we can do about it, except for, if you believe in God, just understand it's in God's hands.
But also that whole idea of run, duck, hide, play dead in some situation. Kids have to be taught this stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, remember duck and cover when we
were
kids?
I remember from a kid, duck and cover for the nuclear attack on this country.
Exactly.
Now it's duck and cover for other sad reasons. Yeah. Well, we are out of time. Marlon, Katie, and Mark, great to have you come in. Thanks for a lively and a good discussion.
And next, it seems like the numbers of Cuban migrants arriving on South Florida shores are up. If you're seeming that they are, well, you are right.
That has prompted many to question, what is their freedom costing U.S. taxpayers? Florida taxpayers. Will take a closer look after the break.
We want to fill you in on some breaking news we've been following this hour. The ABC affiliate right now in Baton Rouge is reporting 4 police officers have been shot and 3 of them fatally. 3 have died. Also, the New York Times now reporting 7 others have been injured. The shooting happened less than a mile from the police headquarters in Baton Rouge, of course, following the fatal shooting a few weeks ago of Alton Sterling. The city is seething over that, and what this has to do with that, still to be determined, but we will follow this for you and give you more information as we get it.
All right, South Florida-based social service groups have been processing, resettling Cuban refugees here for decades. About 44,000 Cuban nationals arrived nationwide at U.S. border points last year.
They receive almost automatic permission to stay and are eligible for a host of services. And because of the uptick in arrivals, some have been wondering about that cost.
A father and son reunion today in Doral. Pedro Soler Morales of Miami hadn't seen his son in 36 years. Pedro Jr. is one of 24 Cubans dropped yesterday on Elliott Key and now being processed by Church World Service. So we asked, why did Pedro Jr. leave Cuba? He says because everyone wants to leave Cuba, because everything's really bad over there. Cuba's economy is in meltdown, just 1% growth so far this year. The sugar crop is bad. Oil subsidies are down from Venezuela. Electricity blackouts are growing. And there's the fear that wet-foot, dry-foot could soon go away.
In summer, the number of folks coming by sea usually goes up. It's always been the case for the last 20-some-odd years, so this year is no different.
Because America is a generous country and Cuba is a communist dictatorship, these latest waves of Cubans are here to stay legally, and they get a wide array of free benefits. It is costly. $680 million a year, according to the Sun Sentinel. That pays for Medicaid, food stamps, job training and placement, and cash assistance.
It varies from state to state. In Miami, probably it's $130 a month that they get, which is not much.
The program director at Church World Service tells me that 90% of the Cuban refugees have a job and are self-supporting within 3 months of arriving in the U.S.
We are following a lot of breaking news right now. Stay tuned. We will be back right after this break. We are following this very active scene for you this morning out of Baton Rouge. 4 officers shot in Baton Rouge. Three of them have died, and according to the New York Times, another 7 are wounded. And this is all breaking right now. A very active scene along Airline Highway. If you know the area, that's where this started, and it is locked down as we speak.
This follows the fatal shooting on July 5th of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. He was selling CDs outside a convenience store. He had a pistol to protect himself against robbers. He did not brandish that pistol when the police arrived, but a pair of police officers from Baton Rouge arrived at the scene. They wrestled him to the ground, and there is video that shows the officers shooting and killing Alton Sterling while he was on the ground. And Baton Rouge has erupted in anger since then. It quieted down briefly, but Glenna, obviously, it has been resurrected this morning tragically.
So what we are looking at right here, according to the mayor of Baton Rouge, Kip Holen, he says there was a call of an active shooter in this vicinity at 9 o'clock this morning, and when police responded, they were the ones being shot. This could be an ambush on Baton Rouge police officers at Airline Highway, which is now closed in both directions. 10 to 12 gunshots were heard there. This is a scene unfolding right now. Please do stay tuned. We will bring you all the events as they happen.
And Glenna and I will be in Cleveland. We will see you starting tonight at 11. Have a good day.
Beautiful Sunday to you.
This is a Local 10 editorial with WPLG President Bert Medina.
It is almost time for you to cast your vote. The election season is here, but your opinion doesn't count if you're not registered to vote. Primary election day in Florida is August 30th, but you must be registered to vote before August 1st or you can't vote. Registering is easy. You can do it by mail, at public libraries, or other government offices. For a complete list on how and where, visit local10.com. But whatever you do, make sure you're registered to vote before August 1st. Then on Election Day, get out and cast your vote. Of course, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Let's continue it on Local10.com.
This has been a Local 10 editorial. We encourage the presentation of contrasting points of view.